I'd much rather hear it from those people who have studied it than from someone who's laid down with everyone that they can find in a porn film.
Welcome to the channel, where things are about to get heated. Today we're breaking down the most confrontational talk show moments that left audiences stunned and hosts scrambling to keep control. From fiery arguments to epic verbal smackdowns, we've got the wildest unscripted clashes that talk show history has to offer. Buckle up, this is going to be a ride. Whoopi Goldberg versus Bill O'Reilly, a clash of titans on The View. On The View, where tempers flare faster than a toddler in a candy store, it's no surprise that political debates can get heated, especially when Bill O'Reilly's in the room. Now, Rosie O'Donnell and Elizabeth Hasselbeck had their own epic showdowns, but in 2010, it was Bill O'Reilly who pushed things to the breaking point. The scene, Bill was dropping some generalizations about Muslims, classic O'Reilly style, but Whoopi Goldberg wasn't having it. She's not one to back down from a battle, especially when it involves sweeping, ignorant statements. She went full-on Whoopi mode, delivering a verbal smackdown that left O'Reilly speechless. And then, plot twist. Whoopi and co-host Joy Behar calmly stood up and walked off the set. Yep, they said, you know what? We're out. No drama, just a mic drop in real time. It wasn't instant friction, but once the words were out, there was no turning back. The tension went from 0 to full nuclear meltdown faster than you can say 9 of 11. Honestly, watching O'Reilly trying to navigate the aftermath was like watching someone try to dance on ice. Shaky, awkward, and not at all graceful. Rush Limbaugh versus protesters. The Pat Sajak Show showdown. On the Pat Sajak Show, things rarely got real. But when Rush Limbaugh stepped in to guest host, the whole thing went off the rails faster than a runaway train. The episode in question? Not your typical talk show banter. Limbaugh dove right into a controversial topic, a recently vetoed abortion bill. And in a move that could only be described as bold and also a little reckless, he decided to ask an audience member for their opinion. Cue the awkward pause. The audience member fired back with a fiery, "You'll never have a baby, you'll never have to have an abortion, madam." Limbaugh, trying to keep his cool, muttered, "You need not react that way." But the damage was done. What followed was nothing short of a disaster. The crowd turned into a sea of vocal protesters, disagreeing with Limbaugh's political views at every turn. By the end of the episode, Limbaugh, who usually liked to be in control, was clearly not in control. It was like watching someone try to juggle flaming swords, except the swords were arguments, and they were all coming at him at once. In the aftermath, Limbaugh suggested that the whole fiasco was a staged publicity stunt by the show's producers. Honestly, though, it was the kind of train wreck you couldn't look away from, and probably one of the most entertaining disasters of talk show history. Mark Summers versus Burt Reynolds, A Tonight Show. Smackdown. On The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, things didn't exactly simmer before they boiled. Because, well, they boiled fast. Mark Summers and Burt Reynolds started with a cordial exchange, and then, in true talk show fashion, things quickly went from 0 to spicy. Summers, known for his wholesome double-dare antics, couldn't resist cracking a joke about Reynolds' track record with marriage. "I was just wondering who told you that," he teased, referencing Reynolds' past divorces. "My wife tells me that often. She says, 'Good morning, I'm still married.'" And just like that, the playful banter took a turn toward the battleground. Reynolds, never one to back down from a good verbal sparring match, shot back with equal force. It was a back and forth that made everyone, including Jay Leno, squirm in their seats. What followed was a rapid-fire exchange of playful insults, with pies and cups metaphorically flying through the air. No one was going down without a laugh or a burn. By the end of it, neither party came out looking particularly saintly, but oh boy was it entertaining. Jay Leno looked equal parts thrilled and terrified by the escalating chaos. But hey, that's showbiz, right? Geraldo Rivera versus White Aryan Resistance, a talk show train wreck. Some talk show feuds are like a slow burn. Others, well, they're more like a dumpster fire. Geraldo Rivera's infamous episode with a member of the White Aryan Resistance and civil rights activist Roy Innis? Definitely the latter. It all started with a bold, yet predictable setup. Geraldo brought together an unlikely duo, and the goal was clearly to spark a little controversy. But, it turns out, they weren't just talking, they were swinging. When Geraldo asked his guest why, if their movement was so powerful, they were afraid to let others speak their minds. He was about to find out. The moment that set it all off, a particularly racist remark that had Roy Innis jumping out of his seat. What followed can only be described as a showdown for the ages. Innis wasn't having it. He took matters into his own hands, and before long, the studio was in chaos. Audience members were screaming, chairs were flying, and Geraldo Rivera found himself on the receiving end of an unanticipated hit. By the end of it, Geraldo's nose was broken, the show's control was out the window, and the ratings off the charts. It was a wild ride, and you better believe no one saw that coming, not even the most ambitious TV execs. Jim Everett versus Jim Rome, the ultimate showdown. The infamous Jim versus Jim showdown. Picture this, you're a sports talk show host, you've been calling an NFL quarterback by the wrong name for years, and he's finally had enough. Enter Jim Everett, Los Angeles Rams quarterback, who's been patiently enduring Jim Rome's little Chris Everett jokes, a reference to the female tennis star. But this time, not so much. In a moment so iconic it practically begged for a South Park parody, Jim Rome couldn't resist calling Everett Chris once more. Big mistake. The tension between the two had been building for years, and when Everett dared Rome to say it one more time, the host couldn't back down. Rome, with that signature cocky grin, dropped the name again. Everett didn't flinch. He just stood up and bam! The interview took a sudden turn into chaos. Rome, a bit too stunned for words, realized maybe he'd gone a little too far. The segment was so wild it almost felt like it was staged, but no, folks. Everett swears it was all very, very real. Neither guy exactly came out of this looking like a winner, except maybe the audience, who got a front row seat to one of the most awkward yet hilarious moments in sports talk show history. Honestly, it's the kind of moment you have to laugh at, even if you're not sure whether to be impressed or a little scared. If you want to explore the journey with me, please leave number 1 and watch this video until the end. Interesting things are waiting for you in the video. Norman Mailer versus Gore Vidal, the intellectual showdown on The Dick Cavett Show. The Dick Cavett Show had its fair share of fiery moments, but the clash between Norman Mailer and Gore Vidal might just take the crown for most gloriously chaotic. Mailer, fueled by equal parts ego and irritation, came out swinging, mocking Vidal's career, personality, and pretty much anything else he could think of, except Vidal's political campaigns, which were apparently too easy a target. Vidal, a master of the verbal dagger, responded with his trademark wit, coolly dismantling Mailer's barbs. The audience? Equal parts horrified and delighted as Mailer declared, "I guarantee you, I wouldn't hit anyone here because they're smaller." Vidal shot back, "Intellectually smaller?" prompting Mailer to demand 2 extra chairs for his giant intellect. Amid this intellectual brawl, poor Dick Cavett tried to steer the ship, only to find himself in Mailer's crosshairs, as Mailer took potshots at the host and even the audience's intelligence. Meanwhile, Janet Flanner, seated nearby, looked like a substitute teacher presiding over 2 unruly students in detention. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. And apparently, it wasn't just for show. Mailer reportedly headbutted Vidal backstage earlier that evening. As the chaos unfolded, Mailer delivered the ultimate mic drop moment, sneering, "Hey, can I talk to the audience? Why don't you fold it 5 ways and put it where the moon don't shine?" This wasn't just a debate. It was intellectual mud wrestling with a touch of Shakespearean drama, and we're still talking about it for a reason. A rude interruption. The Wendy Williams Show's iconic phone call moment. Few things shatter focus faster than an ill-timed ringtone, and Wendy Williams wasn't about to let it slide. During a taping of The Wendy Williams Show, the host's flow was rudely interrupted by the unmistakable chime of someone's phone. Without missing a beat, Wendy zeroed in on the culprit and delivered the line we've all fantasized about saying to that one person ruining a theater experience: "Tickets are free, but when you come here, you must turn your phones off." Her frustration was as real as it gets, but Wendy managed to diffuse the moment with her signature sass, sending the offender and their phone packing. Sure, she moved on in seconds, but that moment, pure gold. A PSA for the ages. If you're going to Wendy's show, leave your notifications at home, unless you want to become part of the show yourself. Vince McMahon vs. Bob Costas, the verbal smackdown of the century. Some interviews start slow and heat up gradually. Then there's On the Record with Bob Costas, where WWE's Vince McMahon and Costas squared off like two boxers who skipped the weigh-in and went straight to the ring. From the jump, Costas wasn't pulling punches. He opened with a brutal jab. XFL ratings are down 75% from week 1. They now rival the lowest ratings ever in prime time, not just for sports, but for any television show. Can you guarantee there will be a year 2? McMahon, never one to back down, bristled like a wrestler whose music just hit for an unscheduled run-in. The tension was thick enough to cut with a folding chair. Costas doubled down, questioning the XFL's viability and McMahon's reputation, while Vince, in full heel mode, shot back with, "You want to let me finish here for a second, pal? Shut your mouth and let me answer." It was less of an interview and more of a high-stakes promo battle, with McMahon looking moments away from slamming Costas through the coffee table. By the end, McMahon was visibly fuming, and the XFL's eventual collapse didn't help his case. But in a surprising twist, the duo reunited a year later for a much friendlier chat, proving even the fiercest feuds can turn into tag teams. Bill Maher boots an audience member, Comedy Meets Chaos. Real Time with Bill Maher has built its reputation on tackling sensitive topics with sharp wit, and host Bill Maher is known for keeping a tight grip on his show's reins. But when hecklers try to steal the spotlight, Maher's patience goes out the window faster than a bad punchline. During one particularly memorable episode, Maher faced a heckler who clearly didn't get the memo about staying quiet in the audience. Maher, cool as ever at first, delivered a sarcastic goodbye, sending the disruptor packing. But as the tension in the room ramped up and more voices joined the fray, Maher hit his breaking point. "I'll kick your ass out of here too," he barked, blending his trademark irreverence with genuine frustration. Somehow, even in his fury, Maher managed to squeeze out a few zingers that got the crowd laughing, albeit nervously. It was a masterclass in damage control, proving that while Maher may lose his temper, he never loses his ability to land a punchline. Patti LaBelle isn't having it, the cupcake tension on the Tyra Banks show. Who would have guessed a lighthearted chat about cupcakes could spiral into TV history? On the Tyra Banks show, what began as a seemingly innocent misunderstanding about cupcake liners between Patti LaBelle and Hungry Girl cookbook author Lisa Lillian quickly turned into a masterclass in awkwardness. When Lillian cautioned against eating the cupcake paper, LaBelle, ever the queen of sass, was clearly not here for the condescension. "What made you think I'd eat the paper?" Patti quipped, delivering the line with a side of unmistakable side-eye. The exchange devolved into a cringeworthy back and forth featuring diet hot cocoa, foil warnings, and enough tension to fill a dozen cupcake tins. Despite the patronizing remarks, LaBelle held her composure like the icon she is, though you could almost hear her inner monologue screaming, "Who is this woman, and why am I here?" The moment was so hilariously infamous that it inspired a 2020 Saturday Night Live parody. Ego Wadham played Patty's stand-in, Cookie LaFloof, while Daniel Craig took on the role of a bewildered chef trying and failing to keep things on track. The sketch's key lesson? If you're going to bake with Patty, leave the foil drama at home. Morton Downey Jr. versus Secca, the talk show. Takedown that set the tone. Looking back, the Morton Downey Jr. show feels more like the chaotic cousin of the Jerry Springer show than anything resembling today's talk shows. The pilot episode? A full-throttle dive into the adult film industry, with Downey taking aim at actress Secca in what can only be described as an aggressive ambush. Downey, never one for subtlety, opened with a barrage of questions about Secca's finances. 10 bookstores at 23 years old? Where'd you get your money? Mom? The mob? His tone wasn't investigative, it was pure attack dog, designed to put her on the defensive. Then came the mob allegations. Do you agree that 50% of XX content is controlled by the mafia and 90% of the money flows through them? You don't believe that? Downey didn't wait for answers so much as bulldoze his guest, all while the live audience lapped up every second of the sensationalist drama. The pièce de résistance? Downey took one final jab, dismissing Secca's perspective with, "I'd rather hear from someone who has studied this than someone who can sleep with anyone they find in a XX movie." It's no shock Secca noped out during the commercial break. Whether Downey's antics were entertaining or exploitative depends on your taste for chaos. But one thing's for sure, subtlety wasn't on the menu. Harvey Pekar Wilds, out on Late Night with David Letterman. Harvey Pekar's appearances on Late Night with David Letterman were the stuff of legend, and not the good kind. They were more like the hold your breath and hope nothing catches on fire kind. One of his most infamous rants was so iconic, it was recreated in his biopic for good reason. The whole thing started innocently enough with Pekar and Letterman discussing a talk show. Letterman, trying to get some kind of answer out of the famously cantankerous Pekar, asked, "What kind of guests would you have?" Pekar deadpanned, "I didn't even consider that question because I don't want to do it now." Classic Harvey. But things went off the rails fast. Pekar went on a full-blown tirade about General Electric, the parent company of NBC, which owned Letterman's show at the time. They're being sued in Ohio because they sold these nuclear reactors around the country, Pekar ranted, completely derailing the conversation. Letterman, looking like a man who just realized his guest had taken a wrong turn somewhere, shot back, "Harvey, this is very bad manners. This is very inappropriate." Pekar, not one to care much for social niceties, snapped, "I don't care, man." The tension was palpable, and it was clear this wasn't part of any prearranged routine. The power struggle was in full swing, and Letterman's discomfort was undeniable. Pekar's wild ride on Letterman's stage was a masterclass in awkwardness and unforgettable TV. Meghan's Choice, words on The View, and no, it's not a compliment. Political debates on daytime TV are expected to get a little heated, but on The View, things were about to go from heated to holy cow. Did she just say that? Meghan McCain and Joy Behar have never been afraid to throw verbal jabs, but this exchange reached a level of intensity that even Whoopi Goldberg couldn't diffuse without stepping in. During a heated discussion about a Trump rally, Meghan's frustration with Joy's interruptions boiled over. As the tension escalated, Meghan snapped, "I know you're angry that Trump's president like a lot of people, but yelling at me isn't gonna fix the problem." And just when you thought it couldn't get more fiery, she threw out a choice word that you never hear on daytime TV. Whoopi, ever the peacekeeper, tried to cool things down, but it was clear this was one of those blowouts that was already beyond saving. It wasn't the first time McCain and Bahar went head-to-head, but it sure was one of the most memorable, probably because, well, someone might have actually said the F word on The View. Let's just say this wasn't exactly the kind of drama you'd expect while sipping your morning coffee. Cher versus Letterman, when the queen of sass meets the king of late night. It's not every day you see a talk show interview that starts off with zero small talk and only gets more awkward. But that's exactly what happened when Cher made her first appearance on Late Night with David Letterman after a 4.5-year hiatus. The moment Letterman greeted her, he couldn't resist diving right in. "I know you didn't want to come on here for the longest time." So, why finally after 4.5 years? Cher, being Cher, was like, "I don't know. I thought it was one reason, but I'm sure it wasn't that." And Letterman, ever the sharp guy, pressed further. "What's the reason? You thought I wanted to pay your hotel bill?" Classic Letterman, trying to crack a joke in the most uncomfortable way possible. But Cher, with her signature dry humor, responded with a real zinger. She revealed that the reason she'd been avoiding the show all these years wasn't what anyone expected. "You thought I was an ass?" Letterman asked. Cher didn't crack a smile. She paused for a few seconds and then hit him with, "No, I thought you were an astronaut." There was a beat of silence, and Letterman looked like he had just been beamed up into space himself. The tension in the room was palpable. But hey, if anyone could make even the most uncomfortable interview entertaining, it's Cher. Dakota's birthday, Ellen gets totally called out. Ellen DeGeneres is the queen of keeping her cool. But even she wasn't ready for the curveball that Dakota Johnson threw her way on the Ellen DeGeneres show. It all started innocently enough with Ellen wishing Dakota a happy belated birthday, asking when her big day was. Dakota calmly responded, "October 4th, to which Ellen replied, "Oh, you turned 30. Then came the classic Ellen move. She probed a little too much about Dakota's birthday party. "So, how was the party?" she asked, fully expecting a typical celebrity answer. That's when Dakota dropped the bomb. "I wasn't invited." What followed was pure awkward gold. Ellen, clearly surprised, chuckled and tried to brush it off. "Oh, I wasn't invited. Oh, that's funny." But Dakota wasn't having any of it. She shot back, "Actually, no. That's not the truth, Ellen. You were invited." Ellen, clearly taken aback, fumbled, "Well, I didn't even know you liked me." And Dakota, cool as a cucumber, said, "I didn't even know you wanted to be invited." Of course, Ellen tried to save face with some comic timing and lighthearted banter, but there was no escaping the fact that the opening minutes of this interview were extremely uncomfortable to watch. The tension was so thick, you could cut it with a knife, or in this case, a party invite. Madonna versus Letterman when the Queen of Pop took over Late Night. Madonna's appearance on The Late Show with David Letterman started off with a bang. Unfortunately, not the kind you'd expect. Letterman, with his usual charm, introduced her by saying, "In the past 10 years, she's sold over 80 million albums, starred in countless films, and slept with some of the biggest names in the entertainment industry." Ahem. Not exactly the warmest welcome, huh? But then Letterman, ever the troublemaker, added fuel to the fire by suggesting, "Why don't you go kiss a guy in the audience?" Madonna, clearly unbothered but with a hint of sarcasm, shot back, "So obsessed with my life." The whole thing went wild from there. The Queen of Pop, never one to back down from a challenge, responded by tossing her underpants at Letterman. Yes, you heard that right. It wasn't exactly a thanks for the interview gift, but Madonna wasn't about to let Dave steal the spotlight. As the conversation spiraled, filled with expletives and innuendos from both sides, you could tell this interview was no longer about promoting her latest album. It was more of a who can make the other blush first kind of situation. The tension, combined with cigars and a very shocked audience, made the last few minutes of the interview less talk show and more full-blown chaos. If anything, it was a reminder that in the world of late night, no one, and I mean no one, can derail an interview quite like Madonna. Tom Cruise versus Matt Lauer, the interview that shocked us all. Back in the day, Matt Lauer was the undisputed king of today, but even he couldn't handle what came next. When Tom Cruise sat down for an interview, things were going just fine, until they weren't. Cruise started off with a perfectly reasonable confession. He really doesn't like psychiatry. You know, no biggie. He was a Scientologist. And well, after doing some research on psychiatry's history, he realized, surprise, surprise, he was against it. Then, without hesitation, he launched into a passionate lecture about being medicated and shocked during psychiatric treatment, and that people need to understand that this is a serious issue. The conversation took a hard turn when Lauer casually brought up Scientology, and suddenly Tom Cruise was on one of his signature rants. The man had a lot to say about drugs, electric shock therapy, and Ritalin. Matt, do you even know what Ritalin is? Well, apparently Matt didn't, because things quickly went from polite chat to an all-out public defense of Tom's very special beliefs. Then came the real kicker, Brooke Shields. Cruise had words for her too. He wasn't just telling Lauer off anymore, he was straight up accusing him of being glib, which is, frankly, the best word to describe a guy trying to argue with a firestorm. In a truly iconic moment, Cruise unloaded on everything from the supposed dangers of psychiatry to how Lauer's glibness was causing more harm than a couple of kids on Ritalin. And let's be real, that interview definitely changed the way we all looked at the Top Gun star, though not necessarily for the better. But hey, at least it was entertaining. Rosie O'Donnell versus Tom Selleck, the showdown we never expected. The Rosie O'Donnell Show, where celebrity interviews often took an unexpected turn, and no one was safe, not even Tom Selleck. In what has become an iconic moment in daytime TV history, Rosie, who was still reeling from the aftermath of the Columbine High School tragedy, went full throttle into a debate about gun control with the beloved Magnum PI star. Now, Tom Selleck came on the show to talk about The Love Letter, a romantic comedy, right? Instead, he found himself blindsided by Rosie, who had other plans. She wasn't interested in his charming mustache or his movie career. No, she wanted to talk about the NRA, guns, and the Second Amendment. Tom, the man who just wanted to promote his movie, was suddenly thrust into a heated debate that spiraled faster than Magnum's Ferrari. He tried to keep it civil, but as the conversation spiraled, he realized this wasn't just a friendly chat. Rosie wasn't backing down, and when she casually dropped, "You're their spokesperson tonight," Selleck had no idea what hit him. But here's the kicker. Selleck, the seasoned actor, was like, "Hold up! I didn't sign up for this. I came here to talk about a rom-com, not a political debate." Still, Rosie wasn't about to let him off the hook, pushing him further into uncomfortable territory. Selleck eventually threw in the towel, realizing this wasn't a casual talk show moment anymore. It was an all-out, high-stakes political ping-pong match. And even though Rosie tried to keep the conversation going, it was clear they weren't seeing eye to eye, and Tom was just trying to plug a movie. Aziz Ansari hilariously roasts CBS on The Late Show. Representation in Hollywood has been a hot topic for years, and Aziz Ansari isn't one to shy away from calling it out, especially when there's room for comedy. While chatting with Stephen Colbert on The Late Show, Ansari took aim at CBS's less-than-stellar diversity track record. Stephen's the first late-night host from South Carolina, right? And like the bajillionth white guy, Ansari quipped. expertly mixing humor with a much-needed reality check. Colbert, to his credit, rolled with the punches like a pro, tossing a few jokes back to keep things light. Ansari didn't stop there, though. He joked about his book, Modern Romance, only to find the cue card calling it Modern Roman. Really? Modern Roman? Somebody's gonna get fired for this. God, I hope it's a white guy. The exchange was classic Ansari. Sharp, funny, and unafraid to say what we're all thinking, while Colbert played the perfect straight man, diffusing any potential awkwardness with his trademark charm. Honestly, this might just be CBS's most diverse moment yet, thanks to Ansari, of course. Abel Ferrara's infamously awkward interview on Conan O'Brien. Conan O'Brien has chatted with just about every celebrity under the sun, so when he calls Abel Ferrara his toughest interview ever, you know it was a wild ride. The 1990s interview with the legendary filmmaker was, to put it mildly, a train wreck, but the kind you just can't look away from. From the moment Ferrara shuffled on stage, it was clear he'd rather be anywhere else. Conan, ever the optimist, tried his best to spark a conversation, but Ferrara responded with mumbled half-stories about Madonna and Harvey Keitel, all while fidgeting with a cigarette like it was a lifeline. At one point, Conan threw a Hail Mary, asking, "Why did she want you to beat up Harvey Keitel?" Ferrara's response? A vague ramble that somehow made things even more confusing. Despite the painfully awkward vibe, the interview had an unintentional comedic brilliance. Ferrara's discomfort paired with Conan's relentless and increasingly amused attempts to salvage the moment created a bizarre kind of magic. And the punchline? Conan wrapping up the chaos with, "Abel Ferrara will be right back. Spoiler, we're still waiting for him to come back."